I was brought up in the fishing industry from a long-established fishing family in the East Coast here. I had my skipper's ticket at 23 after qualifying as a mechanical engineer. But when the Scottish Government decided to open the inshore fishing industry to trawling, I sold my boats, forecast that the inshore industry would collapse within 5 years, and got the hell out of it. I was wrong. It didn't collapse in 5 years, it collapsed in 4. So, looking at all the young faces there, do any of you know what that is? No, this is what's called a bobberlet. Back in the 1950s and 60s, a man could go to sea with a small boat, one of these, to which there was 3 foot length of line with a hook baited, and up from there, about another 6 feet with hooks on droppers with feathers on them. And he could make a good living catching cod throughout the winter months and throughout the summer months too. You'll notice it's designed that as the tide takes the boat along, it just drags, and if it hits a stone, it'll just bounce over it or bob over it, hence the name bobberlet. A man could make a living using very low tech without damaging the environment. So where the hell did we go wrong? Back in 1980, the Barents Sea, north of Norway, were overfished by international trawlers. The Norwegians kicked them out and banned cod fishing. The Sami people, the indigenous people of the Arctic, then decided it was time they took the law into their own hands. When the Sami Digi, the Sami Parliament, was established in 1990, they banned all forms of mobile fishing. By 2014, the area between the Lofoten Islands and mainland Norway and Nordland was producing sustainably over 80,000 tonnes of cod a year. At the time, the estimated biomass of cod in the North Sea, much larger area, was 70,000. So how come they turned it round? Quite simply, by the methods they were using. They weren't destroying any juvenile stock. Net meshes were about 250mm static gear, and line fishing using similar to that. But by then they developed what they called electronic jigging machines. One small boat out of Lofoten, Erik Helgeson's boat, was landing 3 tonnes a day sometimes, a one-man boat working jiggers. Not one fish was under 5 kilograms. The biggest cod taken that year at Lofoten, and I was there when they were fishing the spring fishery, weighed 85 kilo. That cod was 19 years old. In other words, it had been spawned roughly at the time when the stocks were collapsing. They've now got a very, very sustainable fishery. Why did line fishing and this type of fishing die out here? Well, first of all, the village of Gourden, which, does anyone know Gourden? South of Stonehaven, was the mussel line capital of the planet. One boat, 4 men, were working 4,800 hooks, all baited with mussel. But it was the women that baited the lines. So a 4-man boat was actually an 8-person boat. Add on to that 2 pensioners who were cleaning the lines and repairing them, and it was 10 men. It was labour intensive. It was much easier to chuck 2 pieces of metal over the stern and drag a big net. That's called trawling. It's not very selective, as this gentleman can rest assured. And when you tow a net that's got a diamond, it goes like that, so juveniles can't escape. So mesh size is almost irrelevant. At one point, when I left the fishing industry into the oil industry. I was working 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. My 2 weeks off was standing in for crew, mates and everything else out of Aberdeen. I did one trip pair trawling. Our first tow off the south of Sunbury Head had the bulk of 400 boxes of haddock and whiting. 36 boxes went in the hold. The rest went over the wall dead. There was a lot of happy seagulls, but not a very happy seabed. That was the end of it as far as I was concerned. Can we regenerate our fishing? The line fishing industry has been revolutionized by autoline systems developed by the Mustad Company in Gjovik in Norway. They have done quite a few studies on the efficiency trawling versus lines. The carbon footprint of a line boat is far less. Not only that, the quality of the fish being landed is far higher. The amount of carbon burnt per kilo of fish is a fraction. And you've done away with, very much so, with the labour problem. The Norliner 35-foot boat from Ålesund, which works in summer months out of the Koningsvag right up in the North Cape, went out one Friday because the crew wanted to fly home to Ålesund. They went out in the morning and they shot a fraction of their gear, half their gear. 3 men on the boat, 6.5 tons of haddock, all like that and upwards, and 1/2 ton steinbit, that's Arctic wolffish, or sea cats as they were known around here at one time. Very efficient, very little carbon burned. So why are we not looking at that? Why are we not returning to an inshore limit to ban all forms of mobile gear that's damaging not only the seabed, but juveniles? We could do, but we have one problem. That problem is going to be a very contentious one. Because that problem is grey seals. Grey seals, we are told by people like Chris Packham and Kate Humble, were down to 200 at one time. That is a total lie. No one has ever seen the scientific evidence that said there was 200, because they were never ever counted. And the two greatest ecologists of the 20th century in the UK, J. Morton Boyd and Frank Fraser Darling, spent years trying to figure out where this came from, this figure. They also worked out that it was physically impossible for there ever to have been that few. Because if there had only been 200 in 1914, that would have been 100 females, 100 males. Of the 100 females, there would have been less than, well, there would have been about 40% of them would have been juveniles. That would have taken down to 60. Some of them would have been infertile or too old, would have taken it down to 40. For 40 grey seals to go from that in 2014 to having 5,500 on North Rona alone, which at the time was one of 18 colonies, meant they would have had to be producing something more than rabbits could produce. Just didn't happen. In other words, the whole Seal Conservation Act 1914 is based on lies. The other fact is they do not belong in the North Sea, apart from in one colony in the Farne Isles. If you contemplate the situation we had going back to, say, 1600s, bears, wolves, wolverines, wee Hughie the crofter, a grey seal pup left on the shore for 3 weeks while its mother fed it and going to sea to feed. What chances would it have of survival? Answer, 0. These beasts evolved to live on offshore colonies with no terrestrial predators. So why have we got 1,600 of them sitting in the Eithne estuary, protected by the Scottish government? That was once the famous salmon river, as were the Don and the Dee. And we all know the state of salmon stocks. They've gone down. But the anglers themselves are probably partially to blame, because they bought out the last line of defence that they had against the grey seals. That line of defence being the salmon netsmen. Without them, we had no defence against them. They've even protected them against the weather by rescuing grey seal pups. If we were to re-establish codnet fishery, and I worked codnets in the Firth of Clyde in the 1970s, you could always tell when a seal had been in your nets, because all they did was they ripped the livers out of the fish. The seal people, SMRU and various other outfits, tell us that it takes 110,000 tonnes of oily fish to maintain the population and their blubber weight. What they don't tell you, but any fisherman down in Cornwall that works cod nets can tell, well, gill nets can tell you, grey seals don't actually eat cod. They only eat their livers. So to actually get the amount of fish that these creatures are damaging, you've got to multiply it. Even if part of their diet is going to be sand eels, which is unlikely with the grey seal, but herring or mackerel or salmon and sea trout, we're still looking at these creatures killing more fish than our fleet is actually landing. Would you protect rhododendrons growing in your garden? They don't belong there? No. Ponticum, rip it up. Japanese knotweed, oh no, we don't want that, it doesn't belong here, rip it up. Giant hogweed, same. So why are we protecting these grey seals? Instead of trying to get back into a natural balance, predators kept the seal numbers down. The first grey seal in the Scottish sector of the North Sea, anybody got any ideas when that was? It is the first grey seal in the Scottish sector of the North Sea. When was that? May 1953. We have gone from one grey seal on the rocks at Catterlin, south of Stonehaven, to how many are there now? About 150,000. If we want to see our fisheries regenerated, we need to look at the big picture, and we really do need to put practicalities before saying, you know, how would you put it? Sentimentalities. We've got to stop people like Kate Humboldt saying 4,000 seal pups at Blakeney Point, what a wonderful triumph for conservation. Not if you're a dab in the wash, they're not. If we're going to feed future generations with marine-based proteins, we will need to have a complete rethink. We're seeing this in all the places I've worked, in Canada, Greenland, Svalbard, Northern Norway. All these people are trying to maintain their fish stocks, but they're also trying to work with nature. The Sami and the Inuit, who I've spent many, many years working with, these people lived within their environment. They lived within the constraints of nature. We should be learning from them, but we should also be using modern technology like the Mustad Autoline systems to get away from the damaging ways we're doing. That's the way my view of it is. And I've seen the damage done. I made a good living as a fisherman, and I turned my back and walked away from the job I loved to end up basically as an academic on sustainable ecology, but mainly in the Arctic. But I feel we have the chance. The technology's there. The knowledge is there. The only thing that's not there seems to be the political willpower and the fact that there is far too much money invested in the fishing industry in large vessels. Now, we can't see young men coming into the industry, not even in the creeling sector on the west coast for nephrops, because it costs too much for them. The actual cost of setting up even a creel boat is way beyond the average youngster. We've put it out of their way. But what happens when my generation, I'm 75 next Monday, when my generation goes, who's going to run the fishing boats? You go to Mallaig, how many of the local crew are young local men? The answer is none. It's all foreign crews. If we're going to make this sustainable, we need to rethink. I was asked by Ian Blackford less than a year ago. Someone had told them I was probably the only person who could help revive West Coast fishing. And he wanted to know my ideas. I put together quite a proposal and sent it to him. Then, of course, he sort of fell out of favour in politics and he's no longer there. But I shall be making that paper available to certain people that are in here. We've got the knowledge, we've got the technology, we just need to get the political will and change the mindset of the existing generation of fishermen. If anyone has any questions on this, I'm open for any of the questions. But that is basically the simplified version of it. Thank you.